Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel Leder, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with my two co-hosts. First of all, Michael Graves, a.k.a. Big Mike.
Namaste.
And of course, we have the great Father Lucas.
Hotep.
And unfortunately, Julian Harper is not here today. He's on Community Cop assignment, but he will be joining us again next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. But we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience, to what we hope will be a very informative program where truth and real talk occurs. Excuse me for that little feedback there. But as customary, and as everyone knows, these last few days there's been a lot of rallies and commemorations for the birthday of the great Martin Luther King. Michael, this is one of the greatest African Americans across the board who made great contributions to this nation in terms of bringing justice and equity, attempting to bring justice and equity to a country and a society that is based and rooted in white supremacy and racial animosity and hatred. What were some of your thoughts on our great ancestor, Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, certainly I would start out by saying that most would argue that he was certainly the voice of the second half of the 20th century. You know, I would say that certainly as a Christian minister, you know, you have to remember that his grandfather as well as his father came out of the Baptist tradition, and he and all that he did and all that he accomplished, he never strayed away from his religious undergirding, and so that's preeminent. So wherever he went, and I would say that all of the things that he had to decide, it had a Christian dynamic to it. So whether it was the war, whether it was the way he chose to fight injustice, certainly the civil rights motivation, even though a lot is said about Gandhi when all is said and done, I think it had to do more or less with his Christian orientation more than anything. And as we explore the different parameters of Dr. King today, you know, at the epicenter will be his Christian faith.
Father, it's interesting that Michael talk about all the dynamics of Martin Luther King, because there's been a great attempt by the general society to sort of corner Martin Luther King in the "I Had a Dream" speech. You know, although that was part of his personality, as part of his record, you know, the great speech that he made at the Washington Monument, "I Have a Dream." But that's not the only side of Martin Luther King. Michael referenced to his speech that was made at Riverside Church, "Why I'm Against the Vietnam War." There's an attempt in some of the movements, some of the marches that has taken place to reclaim Martin Luther King.
Yeah, and I see one of them particularly in talking exclusively about Martin as a civil rights leader. Martin was that, but he was far more. He was a prophetic voice addressing the needs of not only this country, but the needs of society. And to just limit him to be a civil rights leader really doesn't begin to say half the story. And that was why, as Mike referred to, why I opposed the war in Vietnam. And then the second shot when he said the speech beyond Vietnam, so many of those preachers from the same background took off at him, and some wouldn't even walk with him anymore, because you were going to hurt the civil rights movement, which means they had no clue of what a real prophetic voice was. And you're going to tell LBJ against us. Well, LBJ had no love for Dr. King in the first place, or any more of us. So that business about a civil rights leader. And then, as Michael referred to, yes, that was a great speech, "I Have a Dream," but he had a number of great speeches that were far more direct to what the situation was than the "I Have a Dream." We mentioned the one, certainly the talk he gave in Memphis to the sanitation workers, when he made it very clear, you know, that any honest work is honorable, and you don't have to be a doctor, a lawyer, an
That's the
Indian
mountaintop
chieftain.
speech.
That's the mountaintop speech. And then the other one where he spoke about there's so many of his speeches, you know, that never that are really hidden. Thank God I was able to get the whole recordings of all of them. But he had some magnificent speeches.
All right, right now we're going to reflect. We're going to watch a little clip of Martin Luther King being questioned very strategically by Mike Douglas on the Mike Douglas program. Actually, Mike Douglas is asking him about some of the so-called controversial comments made during Why Am I Against the Vietnam War. Let's look at the clip, and then we'll give our commentary on some of the questions and answers in this historic interview.
We decide to urge Negroes not to fight in Vietnam?
Well, I think my view has been a little distorted at that point. I haven't only urged Negroes not to fight. I feel that the war is so unjust, so abominable, so futile and bloody and costly that nobody should be fighting there. I haven't limited my concern to just the American Negro, although I know we are dying in disproportionate numbers there, and we are on the losing end both there and at home, because as long as the war in Vietnam continues, social programs will inevitably suffer here at home.
Well, don't you think that your remarks have created doubts about the Negro's loyalty to his country?
Well, some people may feel that. I don't think our loyalty to the country should be measured by our ability to kill. I think our loyalty to the country should be measured by our ability to lead the nation to higher heights of democracy and to the great dream of justice and humanity.
Do you honestly feel, Dr. King, that the war in Vietnam could be stopped now without harm to this country?
Well, there are two ways to deal with it. One is a unilateral withdrawal. I don't oppose that because I feel that this is a possibility. After all, France withdrew unilaterally from Algeria. It withdrew without a military victory. And this did not lessen France's prestige or influence in the world. If anything, it increased its prestige in the world.
France is not the power that this country is.
Well, I think that's an even greater reason why we should restrain our power. There's always the danger that any nation will abuse its power. And I think our power must be much more than military power. We don't need to prove to the world or anybody our military power. I think we've got to prove our moral power.
Do you feel that this nation has abused, as you say, their power?
Oh, I certainly do in the war in Vietnam. I have no doubt about that. I'm not saying that it was done with evil motives in mind. I think we made a huge miscalculation. And when you make a mistake, you ought to confess it. One of the great things about President Kennedy was that he said to the world, to his closest advisors, that he made a mistake in the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, and he said, I never should have listened to the experts. And I think the time has come now for our leaders to say that we've made a grave mistake in Vietnam, and we ought to take the initiative in bringing an end to this conflict, if not through a unilateral withdrawal, at least through a negotiated settlement. And I think there are things that we can do to create the atmosphere for negotiation.
You know, Dr. King, my first question, when you said it was, you didn't say it was inaccurate, but you said it was a misunderstanding, that you didn't advise just Negroes not to fight in Vietnam. But I think it was interpreted that way. Now, how about the heroic Negroes already in Vietnam? Don't your remarks belittle their accomplishments?
Oh, not at all. I have nothing but admiration for the bravery of those who are engaged in the kind of sacrificial and suffering situation that they are in. I'm not dealing with their particular situation in terms of fighting. I'm trying to do something, trying to lead us somewhere that will bring an end to what I see as a terrible and a very tragic war, which is damaging the image of our nation here and abroad.
Doctor, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Don't you feel that perhaps the parents of the boys who are now currently in the operation in Vietnam might not be in amity with your civil rights movement now? because of your...
I doubt that. I doubt that very seriously. I can't overestimate the amount of discontent in the Negro community over the war in Vietnam. I haven't seen any loss of support in the Negro community.
I don't mean just in the Negro community. I mean, there are many of the Caucasians who are with your civil rights movement as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if you're not disingratiating yourself, how you feel about those who have their sons in Vietnam now.
Well, there again, I think two things are important here. First, I think that the things that I'm saying and the things that I'm trying to do, and all of the people in the peace movement are trying to do, are really geared toward bringing the boys back home. In other words, we are trying to prove to be their best friends by doing something to bring about the climate that will bring an end to this war. Secondly, anyone who is committed to civil rights would not withdraw that commitment as a result of someone in the civil rights movement taking a stand against the war in Vietnam. And if they do, then they were not with it in the beginning. You stand up for what is just because it is just and right. I think it was T.S. Eliot who said, there's no greater heresy than to do the right thing for the wrong reason.
That's right.
And a lot of people do the right thing for the wrong reason. And I submit that anyone who would stop supporting civil rights because of a stand against the war on the part of some leaders ended up doing the right thing for the wrong reason. They were never truly committed to civil rights in the beginning.
Dr.
Very poignant, very important points and comments made to a very, very game-changing speech while I'm against the Vietnam War. We talked about a book that's written by Travis Malley. We're not promoting the book. For some who might want some more information about the last year of King's life, he caught a lot of flack for that speech. He made a lot of comments that white America deemed to be inflammatory. You know, he noticed that the United States was the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. And it was a true statement. You know, over 1 million lives were lost in Vietnam alone as a result of our illegal and unlawful invasion of that sovereign nation. Father, what do you think about what you just said?
I thought it was Martin Luther at his best. And, you know, some of those silly questions about, he answered about the folks who may jeopardize the civil rights movement, and I think he answered that brilliantly. But so many as we mentioned before, the colored preachers were coming back with that same point of view. And I'm not so sure why, but he did come to change it. Vietnam wasn't a war. That was an illegal, immoral invasion of another country because you were interested in regime change. And you fell flat on your face with it.
Well, this showed the greatness of Dr. King. I mean, this was one of his finest hours. These were entrapment type questions. I mean, to ask him, or why would ask blacks not to support the war, and he answered it, and then he made it clear that he's asking all Americans not to support the war, and he said with blacks in particular, when the question was raised about patriotism, he said you don't measure patriotism by your ability to kill. He said, but to be loyal to democracy, you know. So he was that great education, that great foundation that he had from his grandfather to his father. It all came out in the great, as Father Lucas pointed out, the prophetic dimension. It came out. So with all these entrapment type questions, he just flew right over it and flew right over Mike Douglas and the other guy because they just were not in his league. And so he was able to point out that America is a purveyor of violence, and that to withdraw, just say you made a mistake, pull your gun and grab your clothes and leave. He said just leave, either a total withdrawal or negotiate a truce, but you know, you step away when you've made a mistake. I thought he was brilliant at that, and certainly Dr. King loves the truth, and he made it clear that even if there were those who would have threatened to withdraw their funding of the civil rights movement, he said if you do that, then you would never for civil rights anyway. And I thought that was great. Now, what wasn't mentioned was it was the great Kwame Ture, then known as Stokely Carmichael, who had those all-night meetings with MLK and was able to convince him that he had to speak out against the war in Vietnam. Now, Malcolm was the first black man I know of note that talked about Vietnam, but after Malcolm's assassination, it was Kwame Ture who went to Dr. Martin Luther King when Dr. Martin Luther King wouldn't say anything because President Johnson had did the Civil Rights Act 64, Voters' Rights Act 65, a housing thing in 66, well, the big one came in 68, the Fair Housing Act, but he had already put in legislation that exceeded anything that a president had ever did, but Kwame Ture convinced him. And one thing I've heard Kwame Ture say about Dr. King, at the Slave Theater, United African Movement, he said that the greatness of Dr. King was that even if he had a so-called entrenched position, you could approach him, you could talk to him, and you could convince him. Otherwise, if you saw the error of his ways, he said you would just sit with him all night, and at the end of the night, he was big enough to say, brother, you're right. You got a good point there that I have to say something and challenge President Johnson, even though he did X, Y, and Z for black folks. And that's the greatness of not only Kwame Ture to be able to do that, but it just showed how great Dr. King was to face what in all reality is the truth.
That's a good point you made, because I could remember talking to Dr. King about allowing them to make a philosophy out of, quote, nonviolence. And at best, it was a tactic that if it worked for him, but I don't think that's a philosophy. And moreover, it's based on an appeal to conscience of so many folks who didn't have conscience. He listened. It didn't change him, but at least he got to hear everything and said, well, it's a point.
Well, his willingness to be critical of United States foreign policy as it relates to invasion of a sovereign country was dynamic at that time. It brought him out of favor with a whole lot of so-called black leaders at the time. A lot of people don't know that a lot of those individuals who attended his funeral turned their back on him in his last year during his life after he made that very powerful speech. And they were critical of him, they criticized him, they distanced themselves from him. And that was almost across the board in black so-called leadership.
Well, you have to remember, it's one thing for black leaders to turn their back on you and walk away. It's a whole nother thing when your own people do it. And that's the Black Baptist Convention. They came out against him vociferously. Now, obviously, he was a member in good standing and had run for president of that organization. When they resoundingly said to him, President Johnson is a good man, how dare you speak out against his foreign policy? Dr. King, as I said, embraced that prophetic, as Father Lucas pointed out, dimension, and felt that he had to, because God put it on his heart and he had to speak the truth as other biblical figures did. So he had to, even though this man had did some things that was right. Okay, he was right. He did what was right with the Civil Rights Act. He did what was right with the Voting Rights Act. But he's wrong in supporting a war, as you said, killing sovereign people in a sovereign nation. So Dr. King said, he can't speak and preach nonviolence here, but support violence abroad. So he spoke about that money should be going towards poverty. So the things that he fought in those last years was poverty, racism, and militarism. And he was a giant in those areas. And so when you put him up against those other national leaders that went against him, these were all midgets. in a true sense, because they couldn't speak to Johnson, and Johnson ain't take no shorts. And I mean, it's one thing if you know about LBJ, you just can't come up to him and start talking smack. You better have your thing together, because when Dr. King wasn't around, he referred to him as that little Negro preacher, that short little Negro preacher from Georgia. When he spoke to his friends. And Dave admitted that. That's the way he referred to him. So Dr. King, in a true sense, was nothing to him.
Yeah, very good. And the other thing is about a mistake. It was no mistake. It was wrong. They deliberately invaded Vietnam for the sake of regime change and making money for the military-industrial complex. So what they ought to say, we were not made a mistake, we were wrong from the get-go, from the very get-go of this. And then the other thing about the nonviolence thing was very interesting too, that during those days I could remember making speeches, and the first question the white folks would ask you, are you nonviolent? And the answer, well, that depends on you. God had given me, and talk about civil rights, what was being denied here was not just civil rights, but where you beg Massa to, but human rights given to us by God was being denied, and that was fundamental.
Self-preservation being the first law of nature. Michael, I want to fast forward it to here, because I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who stated at the end of his administration that his greatest concern was he didn't put a nip on the military.
Eisenhower.
It was Eisenhower.
Yeah.
He warned the country about this military industrial complex that he's seen developing that was taking over the foreign policy of this country. Fast forward that today, and don't lose your point. Today we have so-called civil rights leaders who have said nothing about this country's illegal invasion in Iraq, who said nothing about this country's illegal invasion to Afghanistan, about the murder of Gaddafi in Libya, about murders all over the country that this United States of America have joined or taken the initiative of. And these so-called civil rights leaders, I'm not going to name them, because Jesse Jackson and Reverend Sharpton, a lot of people already know those names, so I won't name the civil rights leaders that I'm suggesting have said absolutely nothing. And that they say they're in King's tradition, that they're following the steps of Martin Luther King. What do you see the contracts of somebody who had integrity, who was sincere about what he was talking about and consistent with these so-called civil rights leaders, that we have today?
Well, look, President Johnson had a relationship with Dr. King. Now, secretly, obviously, his relationship was master-slave, because he felt he had the power and King didn't have power. And he admitted to Dr. King, if you watch Selma, he admitted to Dr. King, I'd rather have you there in front of the movement than Malcolm. He said, I don't want black power people running this movement. He said, I want you there and I support you, but I want you to work with me. And LBJ made that clear. Now, with that relationship, he was still able to tell him straight up that you have to do something about this Vietnam War and pull the troops out, or else, because we coming. And he made that crystal clear. That's truth to power. Now, these other people who claim that they come in the King tradition, prove it. They can't prove it because they don't speak truth to power. They rubber stamp everything President Obama's currently doing, whether it's in Somalia, whether it's in Libya, whether you see the pressure that's now being put, on various African countries to change certain policies.
And so especially in regards to homosexuality.
Yeah, well, no doubt. Since you mentioned
yes,
it,
sir.
whether it's whether it's Robert Mugabe and what he's doing internally, which he has the right to do within his own country, retrieving land that was taken during a white invasion, retrieving some of that land and giving it back to the indigenous people. They have a problem with that. England has a problem with that. And so I'm just saying this to say that they rubber stamp what every president has done. They don't move against presidents, traditionally these so-called civil rights leaders. And you have to remember, they're all financed by white corporations. And these white corporations put them in business because of what Johnson said in the movie Selma. They don't want black folks taking over. In other words, your own self-determination. They don't want them kind of folks. You read this script, and I'll make you a rich person. That's basically, so black folks can't give Reverend Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, and Ben Jealous and all these guys the kind of life that they want. But white people can give them that life. And a life that they can really enjoy and relish. And they also, at the same time, will make sure that their legacy is protected. So they want to endear themselves to white folks. Well, Dr. King didn't worry about that. He always made it crystal clear from the beginning to end, I want to do God's will. So whatever faults he might have had, whatever mistakes he might have made, you could still speak to him. And that's when they try to change that image. And we'll get to that. When they try to change the image to that I have a dream, it's being disingenuous, and it's actually criminal to change that man who was committed and sincere in his principles, his core principles, to limit him to that I have a dream speech and the part about the I have a dream, not about the cancel check. And you don't want to talk about that. It only shows you that they're trying to change what Dr. King is because they want to change what we are and make us look towards the dreaming part and not towards whether it was a real strong personalities, whether it's a Malcolm or Garvey and Kwame Ture and others. And Dr. Khaled.
Oh. I had to laugh at Dr. King's funeral. Go back to the point you made. The phonies who were at that funeral claiming that they were in the line of Dr. King. It was, hypocrisy to the core. And when you spoke about today's civil rights leaders, I'm under the impression that anybody today who calls himself or herself a civil rights leader is a damn fool.
All right, strong language. Why don't you tell us how you really feel, Father? Real quick, Michael, you had the opportunity to see the movie Selma, a movie that was, production was assisted by Oprah Winfrey. Why don't you tell us some of your thoughts on that particular movie, whether it was consistent, whether it actually portrayed the real Martin Luther King and that, whole Selma march to Montgomery?
The movie showed literally nothing. I thought that the character of Dr. King is so profound and so pervasive that to show him as a guy, on the one hand, who had extramarital affairs, a guy who openly had problems with SNCC, which he tried to resolve. He told SNCC basically, you can't move the needle, but I can move the needle in the pulse of this country. In other words, for him to say that he had the inside with white folks and that the cameras follow him, this is what some Negroes do now. So to show that lack of depth, that the cameras are following him and that he can get things done based on sympathy, you got to get your head whipped and take a beating. And then from the cameras, it'll develop some type of sympathy from the onlookers, the people who are watching the cameras all over the country, and that'll move the needle. That's a flawed philosophy because the cameras are not always guaranteed to be around. And even if they do be around, if you have somebody like a Giuliani or Bull Connor or Frank Rizzo and those types, it don't matter what they see on the camera. They don't care. So it has to be based on those who are either caring based on sympathy, or they just want to be, their image, they want a politically correct image. So it's a faulty premise. So I didn't like that, the way they developed that, because it didn't show the character of SNCC and CORE and these other organizations who were strong in their own right at that time.
Right. Okay, Father, you and I had not yet seen the movie, so
Right.
we can't comment.
Right.
So I'll fast forward to tomorrow. President Obama is going to give the State of the Union address. You have, of course, Republicans already gearing up to be critical. They haven't even heard the speech. They're going to be critical. I don't know what white folks have to be critical about. Barack Obama has bent over backwards to please white folks. The banking industry is now recovered from the Bush years. The auto industry has recovered. Home foreclosures is down. The stock market, unprecedented levels. I mean, when Bush left, it was like in the 6,000s. Now it's above 12,000.
Unemployment.
It hit 13,000. Unemployment is down. This country was losing over 280,000 jobs a month. That is not only stopped, but now we're gaining, or this country is gaining jobs. I have to say this country as opposed to we, because black unemployment is still the
Right.
same. He has murdered. He went around the country and murdered every individual that they wanted him to murder. He has maintained animosity from all the heads of states, especially in Africa. You mentioned Mugabe. He murdered one of the greatest African leaders, Gaddafi. So I don't understand why they don't embrace this man. But Father, going to you about this speech. When we're going to come to our phone calls in 1 second, what do you anticipate about this State of the Union speech?
It's going to be good rhetoric. But you look at President Obama, you talk the right thing and unfortunately very often don't do anything about it, or you do the wrong thing. So I'm not, looking forward to any real change. And of course now he's going to have a perfectly good excuse for doing what he had been doing for 2 terms. The Republicans now have both houses. So he could.
I think that he'll wax poetically about his accomplishments. Certainly you won't hear anything about Ferguson. You won't hear anything about Staten Island. He'll talk about, as Noel pointed out, all of the things that are on the uptick, but he won't point out that blacks remain the same relative to unemployment, and that if he tries to tell you that we're at 15%, it's a lie, because that would mean we're 85% employed, and I don't know of any black community anywhere that has an 85% employment rate, and that just 15 out of 100 are not. And furthermore, I think that he will continue to raise the I Have a Dream, which is a conspiracy of sorts, because Martin Luther King was much bigger than that. Martin Luther King came to glory out of the Montgomery bus boycott, which he didn't start. Some people are under the impression that, to show you what you don't know about Dr. King, he did not start the Montgomery bus boycott. He did not develop the Montgomery Improvement Association. He was a part of it, and he was named its spokesperson and president, so to speak, but he didn't start it. And at the same time, he was just working on his doctoral dissertation at that time when it happened. And so I would just say with that he became great in his own right out of the prophetic dimension, and that's where we should look at it, his growth and development, not the I Have a Dream.
I'm hoping that he doesn't mention Dr. King at all in that speech, because that's the height of hypocrisy. When I heard some of the remarks he made yesterday, this was the same man who got a Nobel Peace Prize and was bombing how many countries at the same time?
Simultaneously.
But you remember when he accepted the award, the speech that he gave was a put down on Dr. King. I said, well, Dr. King, that's outdated. He didn't have to face what we have to face today, and that kind of crap.
Right. All right, we're coming to our phone calls right now, but we want to remind our viewing audience that on Tuesday, February 3rd, we're inviting you to the studio. Some of you have been to our town hall meetings before. We're inviting all our viewing audience to come down and watch Community Cop live. We'll have some interactions with you in the audience. That's February 3rd.
They got it right
Diallo 16 years later. Amadou Diallo 16 years later. We'll get a lot of discussions about the police brutality, police oppression in the African American and Latino communities. That's February
She's
3rd.
gonna be there, the mother.
You see the Community Cop MNN at yahoo.com. Reserve your seat. We're asking everybody to get here before 4 o'clock.
The mother of Amadou Diallo will be here.
Yeah, Amadou Diallo, the brother that was murdered by New York City police officers in the Bronx, his mother will be here. So come down, make your reservations, Community Cop MNN at yahoo.com. That's February 3rd, 2:15. We'll ask you to get here about 4 o'clock into the studios here on 59th Street between 10th and 11th Avenue. Any more information, please do speak with us via our email address, and we'll be making the same announcement every Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015. All right, we're at the portion where we want to entertain our phone calls. First caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Harlem.
Mahotep,
brother.
Mahotep, brother.
Listen, I want to say that I've said this before in your program, and you guys have allowed me to do so. Come this January 26th, next Monday, a trial starts in federal court at 500 Pearl Street against the fact that black people have the right to stand in public amongst one another doing nothing other than conversing. I am the victim of the assault of law enforcement officers here in Harlem. The inspector at the time was the name Rodney Harrison. We're going to trial on the basis that they're now trying to deprive us of the right to actually be in public and doing nothing other than showing love to one another, which is captured on video, and state that we don't have the right because we're savages.
Just the time, brother.
Okay, brother, say the time and location one more time.
We're at 500 Pearl Street, 26th of this January, in front of Judge Shira Shanley
Right. Okay.
at 9:30 a.m.
Okay. All right,
I
thanks a lot.
suggest that we all make it.
Okay, thank you very much for your phone call, brother, and information. Okay, welcome to Community Cop. Caller, where you calling from?
Calling from the Rockaway. How y'all gentlemen is doing?
Okay, Mount Tep, brother.
Dr. King is bigger than what we can, there's no words I can put him into, and no box I can put him into, because he was a giant to the black nation here in the United States. But on being alleged, the question was asked, are we at the promised land yet? I didn't get the opportunity to speak, but I'm going to say, what's holding us back from getting to the promised land? Because our so-called elected leaders and politicians are being bought off. They're tap dancing with us, but they're taking down the wrong street. Also, we got to clean ourselves up from calling ourselves degrading names on TV doing drive. There's a lot of things we have to do in order to get to the promised land. They're not holding us back. We're holding ourselves back today. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you for your call. Don't forget, one of the most dangerous instruments, which is confusing the masses of our people, is this television. You know, you have to watch the quality of programs, that your kids watch, because they're getting so many false images, so many false notions through this so-called entertainment network that they have, be it music, the television, so we have to be careful. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Community Cop, how you doing, Brother Ray Ray?
Hotep, brother.
Can I get an analysis from all y'all, and what do you think Dr. King would be saying about the civil rights movement, this so-called civil rights movement that happened with Ferguson? And number two, what do you think that Hollywood always showing us getting beat up and clubbed all over the world with this movie Selma? They have no problem just having us getting beat up and beat up. They portrayed Reverend Bevel as a nobody with no say-so.
Right.
Not even a word from him. Can you give me something on that?
Okay, excellent points, brother.
Well, I would say that in terms of Ferguson, certainly if Dr. King was alive, he would be supporting the people in St. Louis in a way other than what you see these national leaders that are acting as ambulance chasers just waiting for a payday. Dr. King will be fighting for justice not only for that family, he'd be fighting to make sure that instead of having 6 city council people, 5 of them white, Dr. King would fight to make sure that certainly the black folks in Ferguson was better represented. He would be fighting in the greater St. Louis area for to make sure that we get justice in that area. He'd be doing those sorts of things, but to allow Dr. King to be just a figment of our imagination and a poster child just for cosmetic reasons, as you see these leaders now. Dr. King on his worst day would never allow these type of situations. He would not be standing by allowing district attorneys to dismiss things like what you see in Staten Island or what you saw in Ferguson. There's no way Dr. King would allow those kind of things.
I kind of suspect Dr. King, if we're talking about Ferguson, Dr. King will first get rid of the governor and the mayor in whatever way was necessary.
Well, I know one thing Martin King would be doing is economic boycotts.
Oh, yeah.
These individuals, these
yes.
so-called civil rights leaders that we have now,
Good
because
point.
they're in bed with corporate America, Jesse Jackson, through the Wall Street Initiative, Reverend Sharpton, through the Madison Avenue Project, and these guys make donations to their annual events to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know Dr. Martin King will be calling for some economic boycotts, some economic
definitely.
sanctions
Good point.
as it relates to these movements. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
It's me?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
It's me?
Yes, sir. How you
Oh,
doing?
what's up, brother? All right.
Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem.
Hotep, brother.
All right. Now, I want to reflect on this guy. Now, you have this up and new rising civil rights leader, right? You guys probably know him. This guy in Brooklyn called Tony Herbert. You ever heard about this guy?
Yeah, we know Tony Herbert, yeah.
Right? Okay, now you guys probably said this guy, but me, I'm talking for myself now. As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't trust that guy with a 10-foot pole. I'm going to tell you something. When they shot Sean Bell, right, out there in Queens, this guy, the very next day, the powers that be stuck cameras and microphones in this guy's face. And you know what he said? He said, first he said, I would like to have a moment of silent condolence for the Bell family, right? And then right after that, he said, and come on, y'all, let's pray for the cops, too. Let's pray for the cops. They need prayer, too, right? Mm-hmm. Now, anybody, you can pray for whoever you want to. I mean, just the very next day, after the cops had stopped 50 bullets in Sean Bell, this guy, I don't trust him. And another thing, with regards to that Selma movie, and Reverend Al Sharpton being so mad about they ain't getting no awards, I do not need no white people to give me no damn validation slip or no damn stamp of approval. Mm-hmm. They can take their validation slip and their stamp of approval and shove it up their ass. All the hell I give a damn about them. Because I don't ask for it, and you better believe I never will. Never will.
Right, okay.
And one more thing about this lady that used to work for Reverend Al Sharpton, Rachel Norlinger.
Right.
And she used to work with Al Sharpton, and now she's in some old business firm or something. Well, I mean, what the hell? And now they got a white girl that took his place. She was the communication director or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And a white girl took her place after her job that Rachel Norlinger had.
Right. All right.
That lets me know sometimes that something. That guy's man. I wouldn't trust that guy no more either, man.
You have a lot of observations, brother.
Well, I'll respond to one. I'll tell you one thing, and if anybody want to challenge me on that, please call in. Dr. King would, on his worst day, would never take a neutral position if one of his staff was raped by a white man. I'll tell you that much. There's no way in the world his greatest detractors can claim Dr. King would say, I'm neutral. I wasn't there. I know both of them. I don't know what happened. But yet, you got a bottle of Viagra at the person's house. Dr. King would not be supporting that. Dr. King would not be neutral. You know, the Bible says, I'd rather you be hot or cold, but since you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. Therefore, take a position. You don't have the luxury to sit on the fence and see which way the wind is blowing. So it's nowhere in the world Dr. King will support a person once one of his staffers say that they were raped. He's going to support that person and fight for justice.
All right, next. I'm sorry, Father.
No, I just think Mike said it, but I don't know what, when you say he would support, I think he would be looking for the truth to find out what really happened.
Right.
Okay.
All right, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Kareem from Harlem. Assalamualaikum, brother.
How you doing, brother?
Okay, brother. Y'all right on point, brother. I wanted to say, what's wrong with these house Negroes walking down City Hall talking about praying for the mayor and praying for the policemen association who keep murdering and damaging black people each and every year of our life? And second of all, Dr. King would especially be dealing with boycotting because he knows that would be in their pocket and that would hurt them. And these Negroes running around here like Al Sharpton and these lying politicians that say they are for our people, all of them are hypocrites, brother. They do not stand up for anything, and they are hypocrites, Obama included. And you're right. Why is it not that these people are not helping those brothers and sisters in Ferguson who was out there on the line every day for things that they know is right, and then these niggas turn around and say, well, they was riding in the roof. Because they are double agents for the white man. You brother, she's doing a good job, and Mayor Law bless all of you.
All right, thank you, brother. Thank you for your phone call. Next.
No, I was just going to say with these for the Negroes talking about praying for them. Yeah, there may be a good reason to pray for them that they may leave this world.
At the end of the day, these individuals, they respond to white supremacy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't care if they're elected to represent their district, they respond to white people. And they make all of these political gestures not out of strength, but out of weakness. You know, because like I said, like Michael said earlier, you can pray for whomever you want, but you know, there's sometimes to pray, there's sometimes to get up your knees and start putting up your hands. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Hello, caller, you're on the air.
In New York. I'm calling from New York.
Okay.
Hello?
Hotep, sister.
Hi, I'm calling from Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, Brooklyn. All right. Quick question or comment?
Yes. I was calling to comment that I found that they were reduced, the entire Selma movie was to reduce him to a dream. That's the reason why they would be having all the students watch it for free. Every junior high school in New York City and throughout. It is not showing when he begins to express himself as Malcolm and so forth, when he demands, he did three things. He fought for Poor People's Campaign. He was down there fighting for sanitation workers and so forth, for them to have equal pay, to have equal opportunities as every other citizen. And I do not like the fact that they keep promoting this, but they're not saying what Dr. King stood for. He made 225 speeches. Why reduce him to a dream?
Right, right. And he made statements like America is giving Black America a blank check. He said, it, you know, in the latter part of his life that he was concerned whether or not he was calling for us to be integrated into a burning house. He called the United States the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. You know, but you're not going to hear, you want to hear that I had a dream speech, and he's going to be limited to that because they attempted to control his image and what he was generally about and not show all facets of Martin Luther King.
Well, right. Why not show when he went to Africa, when he came back, those speeches?
Well, see, the thing is, he went to Africa in 1957 to celebrate the liberation of Ghana.
Right.
And people, that's not covered in the movie, and nobody even mentions that. See, the fact is, to show you his strength and character, he was born Michael King. He wasn't born Martin Luther. His father was invited to Germany, and his father went there and came back and renamed his adolescent son, who was like about 2 years old, renamed him Martin Luther, influenced by white folks. He grew up and he felt so inadequate, he tried to commit suicide. So when he got arrested that first time in the Montgomery bus boycott, when they snatched him out of the car and abused him and locked him up, they put a hook in his cell. They put him in a cell that had a hook on it because they thought he was going to commit suicide because he always felt inadequate and less than. And that's one thing that he always carried with him. He never felt he did enough or, could really command what it took to get the job done. So when the FBI was trying to get him to commit suicide, sent tapes to his house to expose whatever he may or may have not done, they tried to expose that, embarrass him to kill himself, but he showed character and intestinal fortitude. What man will continue fighting once you firebomb that man's house with his wife and young child, a year-old child, basically in a crib, and they firebombed his house. His wife and his child made it out of that, and he still continued fighting. That's not shown in the movie, that man's strength, that belief in God, that strength that he had, that he would fight even with his life was always in danger.
And similar to Malcolm X, you would assume that America had accepted Martin Luther King when he was alive. America has never accepted, even today, African Americans who sincerely fight for the freedom, justice, and equality of African people. You would think that they appreciated Malcolm X by some of the ways and the manners that they talk about him now. But when he was alive, he was repudiated. This country continues to be a proponent of white supremacy in its economic system, in its entertainment system, in its educational system, in its law enforcement system, in its economy, in its labor, et cetera, et cetera. And any individual emanated from our community who are critical of these issues, do not become ingratiated, by the America, because America, as I stated, was based and started and founded on the principle of white supremacy, and that continues up today. But next caller,
Exactly. Well, I also wanted to comment on what was done in Bed-Stuy.
Okay, sister, go ahead.
I also observed that they would kill their own policemen, as they did in Bed-Stuy, the same way they had did any person, because this man immigrated from the motherland. He came here, and there's, all these scenarios. I'm looking at the shoes. I was left with more questions than answers, because they don't show the people that said they saw him
Right.
shoot the police officers and so forth.
Okay,
And I know-
ISIS, we got a lot of callers. But thank you for your point, and you can make the same point next week. We can look into that further. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
The Upper West Side.
Mahotep, brother.
I'm calling about the brother that allegedly walked into the Jewish synagogue about a month and a half ago and supposedly stabbed somebody. I was surprised you all didn't make any mention of that, but I'm trying to understand why was he not cuffed if they had proof that he did it, and why was the knife left within his arm's reach? To me, it seems as though it was a setup to give him a reason to shoot him. Could you brothers make a comment on that?
Well, based on the video that I've seen, there was definitely an injury to an individual. There was definitely verbal warnings given to the individual who clearly has some mental issues to drop the knife. So I don't share your interpretation.
But from what I saw on TV, the knife was on the table, and the guy wasn't cuffed.
Right. Okay. Well, what I saw was an individual with a knife in his hand. But brother, we're not going to debate that. I wasn't there. But thank you for your phone call, brother.
All right.
Next caller, welcome to Community Cop.
Yes, good evening. My name is Barrington. How are you from Harlem?
All right, Hotep, brother.
Yes, sir. Hey, listen, I've always enjoyed you guys' show.
Thank you.
I wanted to make a small statement. In its totality, and I'm just joining the show, and I'm trying to just get in, so I had to tune into you guys. One thing I just wanted to say in terms of this whole experience for us African Americans here in this country, my thing is always that you were saying some real serious, hitting on all points when you was just talking about you and the other brother was speaking about the thing with Martin Luther King. The one thing I wanted to say is that our whole experience here, brother, nothing good could come out of this country for us. I'll just say just one thing. The country was founded, like you said, on white supremacy, but it was also founded, it was supposed to be a republic, but this country is a corporation, not a country. Because in a country in a corporation you have a president, vice president, secretary, treasury, and all of that stuff. That is the organizational chart of a corporation. This country has lost its way. We operate on something called international law, which is maritime law. We are in a Roman law civil society. So anything that comes out of this country cannot be good. And black people, black men in particular, have to always correct white folks in this country. It is the white man's burden. I don't know if you guys saw that movie with Ira Belafonte some years back, a couple of decades ago, and it illustrates the reversal of white supremacy in terms of black supremacy. But what I'm just saying simply, brother, is that what good could come out of this country when it started, in its inception, it started on something very foul and evil and devil worship type of system. And that's all I want to say, brother. Okay. You guys are doing a fantastic job. Because I want to get it on. I want to just really get things going.
I got you, brother. Okay? Listen, ain't no denying for over 400 years this country enslaved millions and millions of African Americans. And after slavery, you had Jim Crow, you had lynchings, you have. So this history, and we're not even talking about what happened to the American Indian, so-called American Indian. This country was and will continue to be a country of white supremacy.
Yes.
I see nothing changing. Fortunately, the attitudes of many Americans have changed. But as you said, the corporate structure of this government, the individuals who are in charge of this country are clearly white supremacists, and they have the dominant air of this country, and they control policy, and they control, et cetera, et cetera. But before we cut off, because I see we 5:55, anybody want to make a comment?
I would just say that they're oligarchs and plutocrats. There's no doubt that it's not a republic.
Right.
That's right.
And never was a democracy.
That's right.
Okay. Brother,
Thank you.
Thank you for your phone call. Knowledge is power.
God bless you.
God bless you, too. Don't forget, once again, we're going to have a town hall meeting. Diallo, 16 years later, his mother should be in attendance at our audience. We're inviting all of you to come down. February 3rd, we ask you to arrive at 4 o'clock. You can email us about your presence here so we can make certain that we have enough chairs out for everyone. Don't forget, communicate with us, communitycopmnn@yahoo.com. Knowledge is power. Closing comments.
Yes, I just want to thank the Million Woman March for inviting me to Newark, New Jersey. Thank you, Sister Empress, Sister Filet. The outpouring was beautiful. Myself, Dr. Calfani, and Automatics, it was good, and thank you, and looking forward to doing it again in February. Reinstate Automatics. And UAM tomorrow night, 7 p.m., between Franklin and Classen, 1061 Atlantic Avenue, United African Movement. Great speaker tomorrow.
Check out the rhetoric tomorrow and see what happens.
Right, and trust you me, when your president speaks, he ain't gonna say nothing that he did for African American people, you know, because he's done very little. Any benefit we got out of some of his policies, with some of his policies have been good. I support the Medicare, not the Medicare, but the health care. It could have been a little better.
A little better.
Right, but we benefit because other benefit. We always get on the tail end, you know, even as it relates to his. Well, anyway. On behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our engineers and our producers, Veronica Kitt, Nat Wood, Sheila Berry, Lou's sister Sierra's in the engineer room. We'd like to thank you, our viewing audience, for watching. Tell a foe, tell a friend to tune in every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, Community Cop Live. And don't forget, we want to see you on February 3rd here in our studio. We want to meet you, greet you, shake your hand, entertain your questions, have good dialogue and conversation. Thank you for watching. Knowledge is power. Peace.
You got 30 seconds.
Little Mo. Love you, Little Mo. Almost forgot.
30 seconds.
Mr. Hawk and Kitty Cat, any closing comments?
Well, I just say again, Dr. King would not be giving a bottle of Viagra to somebody for immoral purposes.
And Dr. Martin Luther King would definitely be calling for boycott, you know, of a system that continues to exploit. And before he died, he was doing a Poor People's Campaign in the White House lawn, and they weren't going to move until they got some legislation on poor people. And we living in a time where poverty is at its height, homelessness is at its height, soup kitchens are expanded, you know, especially in New York. There's more soup kitchens today. There's more poor families and homeless shelters. And where's your civil rights leaders? Where are they? Where are your Martin Luther Kings? These individuals that you ingratiate yourself to, you know, really. Knowledge is power, no justice, no peace. Martin Luther King, we will always remember and never forget your legacy.